Well, the borderline unconstitutional and useless Federal Reserve begins its two-day meeting today with the intention to announce an interest rate cut tomorrow, the first of its kind, I think, since 2020. Some senators are calling for a 0.75% cut, the Fed signaling only a 0.25% cut. The idea, though, is to stave off a recession and stimulate the borrowing market for cars and, more specifically, for homes, which Kamala Harris has even noted.
My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration.
He doesn't know how this works. This is the difference between the two candidates. Kamala Harris wants to print a bunch of money that will inevitably drive inflation up more, that will give you a measly down payment, not even a down payment, a credit in your taxes for a down payment. Whereas Trump wants to make the overall economy better by getting the government the heck out of the home buying process. And if there's any doubt which candidate's policy is better, just look. Let's say you bought a $500,000 house today with a free $25K incentive from the government with the current interest rates at 7.25%. That gives you a monthly payment of $3,240 per month. Okay, now, if you had bought that same house for the same $500,000 under Trump without the extra $25,000 payment at 3.25%, obviously no government incentive, so you'd be paying the full amount, you would have, $2,176 monthly payment. They can give you a $25,000 down payment all day long, but your mortgage payment is still $1,100 higher than it would be under Trump's interest rates. That $25,000 down payment doesn't even cover the first 2 years you'd be paying in additional payments on the 30-year mortgage. Liberal math. My point is, a good economy is better than free money because you end up spending money that's not yours, that has to be printed and then causes inflation. Plus, if they give it to everybody, the same handout, then you might as well give it to nobody because everything goes up by that much. There's simple market rules. Don't forget, this is what happened in 2008. It's strikingly similar. Banks loan out money based on the value of an asset. Now, the bulk of those assets decrease in value, which happened in 2008, and we're dangerously close to now. All those banks, all they can do is pray that people keep paying the value that it once was. Because if a small percentage, like 10%, stop paying, everything goes bust. This is the difference right here. You can see on screen the unrealized losses of that crisis in 2008 on the left versus what's pending today. Catastrophic for the economy should this bubble burst. This is the product of super bad economic policies over the last 4 years. Mark Matson, author of Experiencing the American Dream, and Jennifer Stefano, Executive Vice President, Commonwealth Foundation. Mark, why don't Democrats understand this?
Because they're communist. Yeah.
Okay. I'm leaving.
I mean, the reality is they don't understand free markets. They don't understand capitalism. They don't understand supply and demand. They don't understand competition. They don't understand hard work as a foundation for the American dream. And therefore, they're trying to always social engineer solutions that then have unintended consequences and don't work. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Interest rates are 7%, 6 to 7% for a 30-year mortgage. What's a $25,000 tax credit?
Right.
That won't even pay your closing costs. It makes no sense.
This is correct. And let's not forget this. A lot of people bought houses under President Trump, and they have a really great interest rate, like 3%, right? So the idea that just because you give people $25,000 that there'll magically be a supply of houses that you could just tap into is not correct. You're only addressing one side of the economic equation and not even well. Right. So what you're going to do is just increase the cost of housing. People are going to hold on to those rates because it doesn't make sense for them to give up that kind of mortgage rate. They'll just add on to their house or they'll live with something too small. And anecdotally, this is sort of what you hear people saying now. Well, so it's bad economics.
Don't forget, she wants to build 3 million houses from the magic little economic fairy dust, you know. It's not going to work. It's absolutely, this is what you would see in Russia
they spent
or Venezuela.
$8 billion to build 7 charging stations that don't work.
Exactly. And yet the government does not build gas stations, right? So it's like, you know, there has been economic success and progress outside of the government for most of American history. Why don't we just continue on that trend? Because we became the most innovative, most free country in the world. We have led the way for people to realize their dream and their human potential. So maybe just shut it down a little.
Yeah.
But they are fundamentally communist in their approach, and it's very dangerous because it's only going to make things far worse.
Yeah, and Kamala Harris actually spoke at the National Association of Black Journalists, and yet again dodged the question, are we better off? Like, she cannot answer this, something she has a pattern of skirting. Listen to the same answer she gives every time.
Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
So when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say it is good to be with the National Association of Black Journalists, and I thank you for the work you do and that your members do every day.
When we talk about bringing down prices, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. I grew up in a community of hardworking people.
Do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid.
I can't.
It's clear the answer to the question is no, we're not better off than we were 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that in preparation for this was, is the inflation transitory? I want everybody to know that all inflation is permanent. Yeah. Once it goes up 30%, it's not going back down 30%, and that destroys the people that can at least afford it, which is the lower and the middle class. That is the opposite of what we want. And don't forget, we're not talking about taxation as much. Under Kamala Harris, you'll be looking at the end of the tax cuts that Trump brought us. That's a 20 to 30% increase.
Like,
in
there's all
taxes.
these people now, Jennifer, who are like going to their Instacart and being like, order the same things I ordered 2 years ago, and it's like 3 times the price.
That's right. But this, we have to look at the intentionality of this inflation that happened under President Biden and Kamala Harris. Yeah. Because what does it do? It takes the people on the margin, the working poor, the working class, and now it's going to push them down into poverty. Now, if you're poor or very poor or very rich in America, you're taken care of. And the way you're taken care of when you're poor is through what? Through government programs.
Subsidies.
So first thing is to push as many people into that column as possible. That's sort of the way that communists get it. They need to rely on government. Then what it does is it takes the middle class and the upper middle class, and it continues to push them downward so that they too feel that they're economically losing ground and will turn likely to the government. So what you're doing is creating a class of voters that is dependent rather than innovative, rather than that sort of rugged individualism of the American way. This is as much a psychological issue as an economic one.
Bidenomics is working, guys. I don't think you got the memo. But we got to leave it right there. Mark Matson, Jennifer Stefano, appreciate it.
Pleasure.